Thank you very much. Okay, so call the meeting to order at 4:05 on April 28th. This is the Municipal Manager and GBOS quarterly meeting. Let's go through a couple of notes. Girdwood Board of Supervisors, subcommittees, subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Act, as found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 1.25, public meetings. There's an asterisk behind that. Girdwood Board of Supervisors operates under the Girdwood Public Meeting Standards of Conduct and Acknowledgement. Brian, would you like to read?
I'd be glad to.
Thank you.
The Girdwood Board of Supervisors acknowledges the indigenous peoples of Alaska whose land we reside on. The community of Girdwood, situated between the Arizona to Deneta and Aluktik homeland, respects the people who were stewards of this land for generations. We commit to the continued stewardship of this land and are grateful to be part of a wider community that seeks to maintain a sustainable use of Girdwood Valley for present and future peoples.
Thank you very much. Margaret, if you'd like to go on to roll call for GBOS, and then after that we'll do introductions of municipal staff.
Sounds great. Brianna Sullivan.
Here.
Ann Burnett.
Here.
Jennifer Wingard. Kelly Okonek. Absent. And Mike Edgington.
Present. And if we could do introductions of municipal staff.
Sure. Becky Whitpearson, Municipal Manager.
Quincy Arms, Municipal Legal.
Zach Schwartz, also Municipal Legal.
Thank you. I don't think there's anyone else. Anyone online?
Mr. Chairman, this is Lance Wilbur with Planning Development and Public Works, and with me I have
Tiffany Briggs, Real Estate.
Melissa Babb, Planning Department.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have some other guests in the room as well. Any disclosures? We can take them when we come to the particular item. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda approval. Entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda, this afternoon's agenda.
Move to approve this afternoon's agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any, I'll do this by assent unless I hear otherwise. Any objections? None? Okay. Not hearing any objections. Tonight's, or today's agenda is approved. Okay, let's dive straight into the agenda. I think we've done the welcome and introductions. So let's start on item 1, which is basically reviewing the legal opinions about the role of GBOS and the service area within the municipality. I think it might be valuable if we just got a quick review of these from the administration side.
Absolutely, that's what we came prepared to do. And also I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that Zach has been formally assigned the Girdwood portfolio within the Municipal Department of Law. I know Todd Sherwood carried that role for a number of years, and with some of the changeover, we wanted to make sure that you had a clear point of contact. So that's why Zach is here today for a personal introduction. But Quincy, do you want to start by going through all the various opinions that were received via email?
Sure. Do you want me to read what I wrote in the email?
If you could just summarize.
Summarize?
Maybe points.
Okay. So your first question was about an opinion from the planning director about whether GBOS can initiate Title 21 text amendments. And so our legal opinion was no, currently Municipal Code Title 21 not provide for GBOS to initiate Title 21 text amendments. I don't know if there's a lot of little sites I could go into, but I feel like I just want to deliver the good news, which is I think we have a path forward and we could make that happen for you. So if you have questions about how code currently sits, I'm happy to answer those, but hopefully it will become a moot point.
Yeah, jumping to your other question of what could we do, as we talked about in advance in the pre-meeting, we're happy to bring forward an ordinance which would make clear that that you have the authority to initiate both Title 21 text amendments and also comp plan changes. I know you sent me the draft that was attached to one of, I think, Meg Zalapel's ordinances this fall, and Quincy's looking at that with the Assembly Council because they drafted that original document. So we'd be happy to bring that forward. And I think that would resolve the issue.
Do you know what the status is of that proposed? I think that went to the Planning and Zoning Board.
Isn't it still in you or?
I tried to track it down. It hasn't been in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission yet. And as far as I know, it hasn't even made their agenda. Melissa may know. I asked Elizabeth Appleby is the current planning manager, and she's out of town right now. And she, I think, is responsible for putting together their agenda.
But I
But
think our preference would be to catch it. and
yeah,
Fix it and make it broader than it is right now, and then have that fixed ordinance travel through the process, just because the one that's drafted, I think, only addresses the comp plan or changes, right?
Yes.
And so I think we'd need to augment it to really address the issue. And so our vision would be to try and halt that one and send one through that actually addresses the issue. But maybe, Lisa, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I agree, Becky. That would be our preference as well. And our plan was to take that back to the Planning and Zoning Commission in September. That was our, the direction given by the AR that brought that forward.
oh, okay. I missed that piece. Sorry.
Okay, so, sorry, I'll ask if there's any other questions as well. Are there any other questions from the board?
So if I could just clarify this. So is there anything that you would need for us in this process at all? Or, and am I understanding correctly, like the process to change that is already rolling with some modifications happening while it's rolling?
I would say probably once we have a draft, we would circulate it to you all to make sure that it actually addresses the desired changes. But other than that, I think it will roll ahead, and then it will come to the assembly when testimony in favor of it, if you're supportive of it, would probably be helpful. But other than that, I think we would at this point take the initiation to kind of take the pen and draft the ordinance and start the process.
So timescale wise, I just heard that the plan would be to have that in front of planning and zoning in September. So presumably there would be a draft available at least a month or so before that of the expanded ordinance.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Your second question, I think, was about, it was a legal opinion that I did for real estate and heritage land bank about whether service areas can hold management responsibility for HLB land. And again, I scoured the code, found no authority for that under code. See, what else can I add to that? Basically, under our code, administration of property is specifically delegated to the real estate department. And we have such a thing as delegating it to other departments, but GBOS isn't a department under code, as you know. Do you want to deliver any?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one that I feel like we've kicked around for a while, and I know the initial step that we would propose taking would be potentially altering code to add another GBOS selected seat to the Heritage Land Bank Board to add an additional Girdwood voice to the oversight of that body. I know that that's not like necessarily exactly the desired solution, but I think that's an initial step we could take, which speaks to the overarching issue, which I understand to be the desire to have more of a voice in the oversight of what happens with the Heritage Land Bank lands, given the concentration of those lands in the Girdwood Valley.
Any questions from the board? Go ahead.
Sorry. So again, I just want to make sure I understand. So I think you're saying that right now our only answer to this, or quote unquote solution, is the potential for another designated seat on the HLBAC board. Is that correct?
That's what we propose as an initial. I know that what I understand to be the overarching question from GBOS is how do we have more control over the Heritage Land Bank lands? And I think all these different questions of like, are we a department? To me, at least, and you correct me if my understanding is wrong, but I feel like my meta understanding of the problem is like, how do we have more of a voice in overseeing what happens to these properties that are held in the Heritage Land Bank? And there's a bunch of different things that could happen. I mean, there's bust Heritage Land Bank all apart and create little mini Heritage Land Banks and various different things like that. But it seems like an initial step that we've discussed that the administration is comfortable with is taking the step of adding another Girdwood voice to the Heritage Land Bank Board. Again, acknowledging that that isn't, I don't know, there may be other nuances to the problem that that doesn't speak to, but if my understanding, I guess I would ask if my understanding is incorrect, that the big picture question is the desire to have more of a voice and more control over what happens with Heritage Land Bank lands.
May I follow up on that? I'll be quick. That's great. My understanding when I first brought up that issue some time ago, was, well, I mean, it would be great.
Yeah.
First of all, yes, thank you. That would be great. Although my understanding right now is that we're not necessarily limited on Girdwood seats either, but it would be
Oh,
nice
yeah.
to have another designated.
You could
seat.
have all the seats right now, except for I think they're supposed to have one, it's an Eagle River seat, so you couldn't have that seat. But you could produce more people, candidates just in general, but if we were to change the code, there would be an assurance that there would be an additional voice, or we could change the mechanism by which that additional voice were selected, rather than just being, we have to pick a member at large who comes from the Girdwood community. We could also have something where it is a GBOS selected seat, but there are different iterations of this depending on how you are interested in structuring it.
And Chair, I'm sorry, could
Yeah,
I,
please go ahead.
one more quick follow-up. I think that is fantastic. I do question whether or not we might be conflating two different issues.
Okay.
Because the disposals of heritage land, big land, and having more say in that is kind of one distinct issue, but our separate one is how do we do what all the other communities that we've talked to have done to help our workforce housing situation? And again, because we have to do it through Anchorage, and because Anchorage is not a resort environment, we're kind of up against this, sometimes it feels like kind of a foregone conclusion that our economies are more similar than they are.
Yeah.
And so when we have done a lot of work with other mayors and other communities to figuring out what Breckenridge done Whitefish, and we keep getting told none of it is something we're allowed to do. So that's a struggle. And being on HLBAC, or having more voice on HLBAC, or even being able to decide some of what HLB lands, how they're disposed of, even if we could get to that point, wouldn't solve that fundamental issue. But Mike, correct me if I'm wrong here, but because Mike's done a lot of research on this as well. But it fundamentally comes down to we have to be able to do some of the things other communities can do. And again.
Can you tell me more of what those are? Because I think, to me, I'm trying to think of like short of seceding from the municipality, right? There's the question of what are each of the powers that you're looking to have, right? And then how can we help to either replicate that or amplify Girdwood's voice, or what are the other things? And I know you've probably rehashed this with previous administrations, but what are the other like specific powers or things you're like seeking to have more of a voice in?
Just off the top of my head, I can say we have felt thwarted on short-term rental regulations, on being able to say we want a certain amount of workforce development for every, X amount of market level development.
On HLB lands or
Right. Well, at all, anywhere. So that's one of the tools that Breckenridge has used. I believe they might even be at 80-20 do that, but we are fighting right now to get, one lot, right? 2 lots is this huge struggle. And that's nowhere near the percentages that other communities are setting as if you're going to do larger scale developments, X percentage has to be for the workforce housing that we need to support the economy that we like, hopefully is the golden goose actually for both Anchorage and Girdwood. So the workforce housing piece is absolutely critical. The other part of that is using some portion of tax money, but we haven't been able to do that, right? And so this idea of like adding yet more bed tax to what is already a pretty mighty bed tax, and even then, if we add a couple percentage points, we get to not enough to actually buy land and build, right? Because we're at $500,000 for tiny little lots now, close to the hill, and even $2 million of Point Road for things without services. So we can't tax to that without hitting an over a 20% tax when you run the numbers. So we just feel like we keep getting asked to solve a problem, but we're not given any tools, like one hand's tied behind the back kind of thing. Again, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, or Brian. I mean, we've all done so much work on this. The STR journey is at least 7 years long. And we don't have STR registration after 7 years.
Do you have anything about Brian?
No.
If not, I'll jump in. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Jennifer said. To add a very specific point, so the mechanism, the limitations and restrictions around how HLB can operate are kind of antithetical to the solutions that have been implemented effectively in other communities. So we're not allowed. It's that HLB is just structured in a way that does not allow us easily, or even with some difficulty, to implement the kind of problems that the solutions that have been implemented.
Because of how the
So one
code.
example, crudely,
Yeah.
most of the solutions involve some kind of subsidy, and HLB doesn't really structurally allow that. It has to come, it's an enterprise, so it has to basically fund everything itself. No tax money can be used for it. There's an argument for and against. We can't treat community housing as an investment, which is basically the underlying principle of most other communities where the market is not meeting the needs, have taken that approach. They've basically said that having housing for the community itself is a long-term investment, same as roads, same as water systems. And that is not a framework we can use within the current, I think possibly the current code restrictions of HLB, at least their working principles.
Okay. Tiffany, do you have anything I honestly don't know all of the context here in terms of what limits us from disposing of HLB land in a way that's oriented more around like the goal of providing affordable workforce housing as opposed to the goal of maximizing the value of the transaction. Can you speak to that?
I will try. So I think one of the components of HLB code is when we do a disposal, it goes out for bid. So if someone says, I want to buy this HLB property, that's great, but we put it out so anyone has a chance to bid on it. Now, could we put a restriction and say, we're disposing of this land, but you have to do X, Y, and Z with it? Absolutely. I think so I'm not sure how we get there. So if, during our work plan, if there are parcels that are identified for disposal, do we go ahead and start the process of disposing of those, but put conditions that it has to be for X, Y, and Z? I mean, that's an option. I don't, if that's what Girdwood is looking for us to do, that's certainly an option.
And who makes that decision at the end of the day? Is that the decision that you would recommend that then goes to the HLB advisory board?
I'm sorry, the decision as far as what?
In terms of the
conditions?
What goes into the disposal conditions for a parcel of HLB land?
So what we normally do is we include that either in our staff recommendations, if it's something that is required per like a Title 21. We have to look at all the plans that are applicable for the area. And then it's just what the goal is for that area. So we would take that to HLBAC, then it goes to the assembly. Sometimes they will, put additional conditions on there, but ultimately we kind of are in the driver's seat for what we want to see happen.
Okay.
We can be in the driver's seat, I should say.
Did you have a follow-up? If you don't mind me.
Yeah, go for it.
Nobody objects to me asking this. So very specifically, Tiffany, the currently in code, there has to be a benefit to the municipality as a whole. Do you think that can be interpreted in terms of something which is maybe does not result in the maximum financial benefit to the municipality or to the HLB fund, but does result in something which is relevant to this community of occupied housing, but maybe not the most beneficial use for people elsewhere in Anchorage who may want to construct second homes here. So do you think primary residence could be one of those conditions? Because I think we've had some question around that in the past.
So the question is, do I think that we could put restrictions on, like, it has to be a primary residence, that type of thing, and that's beneficial to the municipality?
Well, the argument I've heard in the past is it's not necessarily beneficial to the municipality as a whole. It might benefit Girdwood, but it's not beneficial to the municipality, therefore doesn't meet the HLB goals. So there's this tension between what's beneficial to people who live in Eagle River and may have second homes here, or Anchorage Bowl and may have second homes here, and what's beneficial to Girdwood in the narrower sense. And that tension, I don't think has been resolved. And I see some concerns about the way the code is written, that it could be easily interpreted as what's beneficial to the community of Girdwood is not beneficial to Anchorage as a whole. So that's the kind of area where we have tension.
I see. I mean, I think there's a case to be made about if we were doing something specific for workforce housing, that's a fantastic benefit. We would just we'd have to look at what, I guess, the ask for the disposal is, what we're wanting the disposal to be. Happy to work on that some more with y'all. If there's specific properties. I mean, I know there's talk of the RV park. I mean, so we're happy to explore any of those options.
Thank you.
If I could just add one finesse point to that, I think that's great, and we have really appreciated the willingness of HLB to work with us, and it's been fantastic. So I do want to thank you for that. I do want to point out that that's kind of one component, and so returning to this issue about this ruling in the first place, HLB is one component. So when we have looked at other areas, other resort areas, and what works for them, it takes a multi-pronged approach. You need the land, and you need the financing, and you need a setup in which you can get the building to happen. Like it takes a multi-pronged approach. So even if HLB, I mean, we also have worked numbers for if HLB flat out gave us some land, and we do have a couple proposals sitting out there. I want to call out for Crystal Hoke, who's online, to supplement market rate development to use market rate development to supplement workforce housing development. And so I think, but we need to be really clear on what we can do, because otherwise we're asking for land without knowing what we can do. And again, when we tax, even if we really raise the taxes substantially, we're not going to get enough to build the ground up here, given our current building costs at running roughly 400 square foot. Some, and again, I don't even want to say that in front of people who I know better than I do. But long story short, it takes a multi-pronged approach, and so just getting one seat on HLB is kind of like toe in the door.
Yeah, I understand. And I think my goal is to try and start moving us in the right direction. I feel like we can work on the Title 21 piece. We can start the HLB piece. I think I have some questions for you on short-term rentals, but I don't think that your desire to have revise or revive the registration concept is it any way at odds with what the administration is thinking about, particularly because the Title 12 change has not really yielded any kind of compliance that we actually were hoping for from that. So I think that I know that we're going to be working on a revised short-term rental ordinance. So I'm going to have some questions on that to make sure that I understand some of the objectives that you have with that. But I think we can work together on that piece right now too. And then I hope is to continue to move toward understanding what each of these pieces are. So short of being like, all right, all the land and go, we'll be, figuring out how to address each of the kind of powers that you're interested in having in a constructive way. So,
what I'd like to do is, I think we've touched on quite a few areas of this.
Yeah.
I think what we should probably do is put a pin in that for now.
Okay.
Have some follow-up, some specific follow-up. But for now, let's continue through these questions and then move on to the other items. And sorry, I saw your hand up. We got cut.
Okay.
No.
What'd you say? Did you say go ahead?
No, go ahead. Yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so it looks like your third question is about Open Meetings Act. This was not an opinion that I was involved in. And did my summary via email answer your questions? Because I think you've had multiple questions about Open Meetings Act, and I wasn't sure I got the right one.
I think not quite.
Okay.
I think the concern, we've heard from the Ombudsman that he did ask an opinion
Okay.
last year. I can't remember the date, but I sent it.
yes, you sent it to me and I apologize. This is the link I realized in the car. I hadn't yet forwarded to Quincy. Was it the one regarding the committee?
Last year, which was about the role of municipal oversight of subcommittees or committees of GBOS.
Okay. Yes.
Identifies in real time, right?
Basically, the Ombudsman response to us was they wouldn't be subject to the Opens Meetings
Okay,
Act.
we agree with that.
Previously, they are. So we just wanted to resolve that particular problem.
Yeah, I would concur with they aren't.
Okay, so that is different to the information we've received before. It's different from what we say at the beginning of every one of our meetings. So that does make a big change.
But the question was specific to subcommittees, right?
Well, committees of GBOs. GBOS is, we're subject to ethics and Open Meetings Act. We know that.
Gotcha.
The question was whether committees and subcommittees are subject. We know they're not subject to ethics. Are they subject to Open Meetings Act? The previous answer we've had is yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
The answer that Darryl mentioned in passing when we were discussing something else was no, they're not. And we wanted to get to the bottom of that issue.
Okay, can we maybe put a pin in this so I can talk to Daryl
Thank you.
and your legal counsel here?
I had understood that
Are
the
you-
foundation of the decision that they're not subject to Open Meetings Act was the idea that the committees were not fixed in membership, that were they're sort of amorphous in membership, sort of like a community council where whoever attends can be part of the meeting. Is that correct? Because I've understood that to be.
I think that may be what the question was, but
Yeah.
that's not the reality of how we do
Okay.
things now. We
Oh.
have two types of committees. We have ones which have fixed membership, and we have ones where it's any member of the community and not just a community.
So that may be a key factor, because at least as
That
we were
was-
discussing it,
Right.
the key issue was is this a meeting that is more like a community council meeting where there is an amorphous membership that is not defined, and thus you can't even hit like the Open Meetings Act questions of do you have so many people in a room that you have to be publicly noticing it? Whereas if it's a fixed membership committee, I think the answer may be different. So I'll let you guys take that back. The real lawyers, I'm no longer really lawyering.
So
So.
that was the sort of nuance I thought might come out of this discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? Well,
Apologies for not being more prepared.
that's fine. I didn't have the reference to it at the time.
That's my fault. I didn't. tell.
I think there was a four, wasn't there?
I don't know if these were legal opinions, but you had questions about pressing development concerns, including Girdwood Airport.
Yes, there was, I think we're going to touch the next issue.
So just skip over that for now.
Yeah.
Okay,
And the last one was about.
and short-term rentals,
Short-term
which
rentals.
we didn't answer yet, sorry.
Okay, so that's still.
It's ongoing.
Any other questions on any of these? On to the next item. Okay, thank you. So, talking of the airport, we have a sort of pressing question about Parsonage, which is the very south end of the airport. Jennifer, let's deal with the letter issue first. So my understanding is we approved a letter at our last meeting, and then since then we've had a request to redraft it, do something different from the residents. And we had, two things. There was a slight change, a letter to an extra request, which I know you and I have reviewed, and I think that is the version which is in the packet, which is not quite what we approved at the time. And then subsequently, there has been another request for a different letter again. What I would propose is
Yes.
that we just formally approve the letter in the packet. That's the thing which is pretty much what we had last time with just the additional ask and some improvements to language. So this is substantively the same as the one we approved at our last meeting with an additional ask in the last paragraph.
May I ask a procedural
Please.
question about that? I wonder if we could even have a few minutes to discuss this after the meeting, but right now just take the opportunity that we have to discuss with the city what we do have that is same in both letters, which is the fundamental issue.
Yeah, that's fine. We
Does
can do
does that sound?
So let's get on. So there is a draft letter in the packet, which is close to something you'll receive formally.
Mhm.
The issue here, if I can summarize very briefly, there are two issues, two developments proposed at the airport, both of which appear to be problematic. The fundamental problem is that DOT have taken the opinion that they do not have to follow any municipal land use code for any development at the airport. Our understanding is that's not the position which municipal legal has taken. It's a bit more nuanced than that. In one of the cases, which is not the one that's the most time, that has the most time pressure, in one of the cases, it's to develop a hotel, which is not actually a legal use under chapter 9. And the case which is in front of us now, which is an urgent parcel H case, is development of aircraft operations and hangar and various other things immediately adjacent to residential land in an area that's previously been used as a buffer between, as a visual noise buffer between the airport and the proximal housing. So that's kind of the primary question. And I think what this letter basically says is if we can get clarity from the MOA about what the MOA's position is on this development and whether you're going to be able to support us in proposing.
Yeah, no, I understood. I had a couple questions. One was, I've seen that correspondence with Senator Giesel. Has there been anything further since she forwarded this letter that came back from Commissioner Anderson?
I don't believe so. I think that's
Okay.
the last one we saw.
All right. And in terms of the municipality's position, I mean, you are correct on the legal position, which our position has been, again, more nuanced than we have no jurisdiction or we have absolute jurisdiction. It's been, we have jurisdiction over development that is not specific to the kind of movement of aircraft. You can correct me if I'm phrasing that
You nailed it.
incorrectly. So if it's a taxiway or a runway or a helipad, we have concluded we don't have jurisdiction. We have asserted jurisdiction in the past over other developments on airport property. And so the challenge, I think, with your most instant dilemma is if it is about the siting of the helipad, that may be the portion of jurisdiction that we don't think we have any legal claim to. I think I need to know more. So I think my next steps are going to be to reach out to DOT directly to understand from them what we haven't even seen a plan of development. What are they doing? When are they doing it? Where are they? And you all probably seen more than I have. We're trying to get more information on this and to figure out whether, what their position is more formally about what they think about our role in regulating that development. What conversations did you all have with the last administration when this was proposed in 2023?
This wasn't, there was a proposal, but it wasn't publicly discussed. I don't think if I recall correctly, the first thing we saw was public notice last fall.
There was a press coverage, I think, from back in 2023. I remember.
We got the notice.
I think there was an original application, but my understanding is that was done just to the DOT. I don't think there was any public notice until, because I think DOT said no, because it wasn't identified as a leasable property.
Okay.
Then it went through a court process. And then when they concluded they had to offer the lease, that's when the public notice appeared. And typically that is the only public input in the process.
Got it. I'm just thinking about that. I remember when it was announced in the press, maybe towards spring of 20.
But that may be
Something, and I was like, oh, that was the hotel, not the heli. But I had always understood the hotel to come with a heli-skiing operation, which I don't know if I had any kind of nuanced of understanding of whether that was using existing infrastructure or building new infrastructure. But it's in a different location. Okay.
There was some aircraft operation.
Got it.
I think an FBO associated with that. But,
okay.
I should recognize Kelly has joined the meeting. Kelly, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add that my understanding of this parcel H is that somebody applied for it. DOT turned down the lease for the very reasons that, are stated here because it's a greenbelt. It was challenged in court. The courts ordered that the DOT had to lease it, at which point they made it an open bid, and that's when Silverton bid on it. So the history of this parcel is fairly complicated, and they were compelled by legal action to offer it up for lease.
So this is specific to Tract H, not to the hotel development.
This is specific to Tract H. Yes.
All right.
But I think in both cases, the question is, is the municipality prepared to at least deal with the land use code? Because if so, if land use applies, then presumably things that comprehensive plan apply as well. It can be part of deliberation. And at the moment, DOT's positions don't care.
Mm-hmm.
It's purely an administrative function within DOT.
They have asserted that to us as well. But I think our follow-up is we need to circle back with them and better understand what is proposed and where, and then make clear to them our position, which again, I think the challenge of our position is that likely it is not necessarily helpful in the siting of the helipad itself, because I do think that you can apply on the law, but that legally we don't have the ability to regulate that on airport land. But I need to know more from them about what is proposed and where and how the pieces fit together to be able to just be responsive to your letter, which I understand will not be forthcoming.
Okay. Please go ahead.
So I ended up having an opportunity to dive into this a fair amount. I want to notice that we do have two representatives from the neighborhood, Steve Halverson and Camilla Seegert, and we've had many hour talks of this. I actually think this is a kind of an interesting multi-layered issue. We have a couple of timelines. So the longer timeline is this overall issue about DOT and whether or not local area plans apply. So that is. And I understand this position, but I don't think that's the only thing going on here. The other issue, the kind of mid-level thing here is, or the most immediate thing is the neighborhood's very concerned about these trees getting cut down and losing this buffer in the course of this all getting hashed out. But also, I do want to draw attention to the fact that DOT actually fought this on several levels So I think that might be an opportunity for a win-win. My understanding
Get on the same page.
neighborhood that they're most interested in is meeting with the city and DOT and trying to figure out a way to deal with this property. And what intrigues me about this is I do feel like I've seen a kind of shift in, and maybe I'm wrong because I'm only 5 years into this right now and I still feel like maybe, but I feel like I've seen a shift in DOT in at least parts of DOT and being interested in the neighborhood, because fighting against a neighborhood is fun. But also because there have been issues even at a national level with the lack of local communication that we have in our states with our state DOT. So I could see on one level, yes, this might turn into a protracted argument or an in-depth argument about the role of local plans, but I think there is an opportunity here to build conversation between the city and DOT as well. And that's, I think, what the neighborhood would most want right now is just get a chance to talk with city and DOT. What can we do here?
I think that makes sense. I think that aligns with, but again, I think I'd like to learn more from DOT, and then once we've had that initial conversation, where we can be in a broader conversation to talk about what the options are.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make sure, did I summarize that fairly? Is that all right for me to ask to the chair? If I can just double check.
Be brief. Thanks. My name's Steve Halverson, and I live nearby this area. Basically, the reason we're asking to meet with the planning department and DOT, but ideally first with the planning department and legal, is it's specific to the new Girdwood comprehensive plan. We just went straight to it, and it speaks exactly to this. And it seems to empower Anchorage to discuss this. You know, it specifically talks about 3 items: development at the Girdwood Airport that recognizes the community, sense of place, and natural environment. So we're just trying to approach it through those 3 things. And another thing I think that's important is we're not really talking about a helipad per se right there. You know, if we're talking about movement areas, it would be the taxiway, which is recently, what was it, 2 years ago, we wrote it away.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part, the proposed parcel H there is, it's just a structure going to go in. It's just parking.
Oh,
It's a hangar. He's looking for a hangar. So it's not officially a heliport. A heliport would have a designated spot with an H on it and all those kind of things.
Okay.
So there's a lot of room here, I think, for discussion.
And that's, I think, why I want to know more information, because again, I think that our decision, if it were the pad itself, I think there we lose jurisdiction, but if it is an appurtenant structure.
It would be no different than if you owned a Super Cub and you were trying to pull it in
It's a
there.
structure.
It's structure. Thanks for letting us speak, but our hope is to maybe meet along with GBOS with you before you meet with the DOT.
Okay.
And explain a little bit, if that's possible. Thank you. Thank you,
One
Chair.
thing to add, there has not been historically a lot of contention between residential and airport use in that area. Occasionally that, but mostly that hasn't. And part of the reason is because there's this chunk of land that provides a
Buffer.
fairly effective noise buffer. And I don't think anyone would plant things this way now. And it's only the existence of the buffer that really has prevented greater conflicts. So removing those trees would be very, very significant.
Mhm.
Please, yeah.
One thing that has not been mentioned is also that this parcel here runs counter to the airport master plan.
Yes.
So when you do discuss with DOT, knowing the airport master plan and their recommendation that helicopter operations move down to the northeast end of the airport is a more appropriate place for them. So this is in addition to being counter to the Girdwood Comprehensive Plan, also their master plan from 2020 or 2019 or something.
2005. It's the current master. Yeah, it's the current master. We asked them.
Have you asked them that? DOT directly?
Yes,
Yeah,
Well, we asked if that was current. We haven't really spoken with them.
them about why the
Fairly
conflict.
all on paper.
Planning. Okay.
I think that's addressed in the administrative judge rule as well.
Sorry. Okay.
I know we potentially have some other work to do on this, but I think we're at the point where it's clear what we're asking from the municipal manager, even if formally we haven't done so yet. Can we move on to, sorry, yeah, sure.
Just one quick thing, I do want to add that there is a sense of urgency with neighborhoods. The locate service was there today. There's clearly been progress on this. And so I guess the feeling is that there has not been recognition of the many concerns about this parcel from the potential, from the leasing. But we can leave it on that, and I know we need to be quick. So thank you, Chair.
Well, I guess just to add one thing to that, there's definitely certain actions which would require a land use permit, certain types of clearing, for example. So my understanding is they have not applied and do not intend to apply for a land use permit. At some point, we potentially ask for enforcement, or neighbours will ask for enforcement action.
And I think, again, I think my first action is to reach out to DOT and make sure that we can have a direct conversation.
Thank you. Kelly, if you have a quick comment on this. But we can't hear you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was just going to say, we were talking about time pressures, and I just want to remind people that when DOT was at our meeting, they said that this lease has not been awarded. So from my perspective, the time to be most effective is before the lease is actually awarded. And I don't know what their time scale is for that, but they did share that detail when they were at the GBOS meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would like to move on, if everyone's okay. So we have 4 more items and 15 minutes left. Some of these hopefully will be quick. Can I suggest we quickly touch on, there's no objection, can we just 4 and 6 first, because I think they're the quickest. So alcohol tax, we had a question about first quarter budget revision changes for use of alcohol tax in outside of the Anchorage Police Department area. And my understanding is these items don't typically appear as line items in the budget. So we just want statuses, and I think Brianna might have some additional questions.
I did take the app back to OMB, and I'll try to align the changes that were made in Q1 with the requests that we saw come through in the letter that Brianna cited. It's up here. So my understanding is we have the response to the requests for Chief Weston for fire have ended in a $64,500 addition to the fire budget. That's specific. I know that doesn't address all of these requests, but like every Q1 budget revision, we are generally unable to satisfy 100% of what every area of the municipality wants. So that line item was added to that amount of money was added to the fire budget specifically for Girdwood. There was no addition to the police or for these police items. And I actually had some questions about them because my understanding of the Whittier relationship is that it's entirely contractually governed. And so I wasn't sure if this was a request for a change to the contract, or how this, I think we were scratching our heads a little bit in City Hall about these specific equipment asks for Whittier PD.
I think in prior years, we've mostly asked for training, which is relevant to, I think, the Girdwood context, not for specific pieces of equipment, but maybe Kyle can speak to that.
I wasn't aware until I saw this letter, actually, that there was a request. And I think it was just mostly reaching out to both public safety departments to see if funding can be provided for it. I do see the conflict with municipal dollars going to the equipment spent for Whittier and Girdwood, and who would own the equipment in the end. That's the question, I guess.
And have we explored whether, I mean, this is relatively low dollar equipment. Have we explored whether like this is something we could loan from APD, or I don't know if that, maybe even I can take that offline and talk about that if that's the right route, Kyle, just to this problem I wasn't sure if we were solving it the right way.
Yeah, no, we haven't explored that, so we could talk about that, but
okay.
I think yep. So it'd be interesting to look at if it could still be owned by the service area, but loaned to them for use.
Or if we could there's use area-wide police funds for, I don't know, I think we could explore whether there are options, but okay. Yeah. We can take that offline for a discussion.
But so the headline here is 64,000 for
fire,
additional fire.
Yes.
Okay. If there are no further questions on that item, let's just quickly touch 6, which was tsunami signs for Girdwood. We had a request of.
Hi there. Ben Russell, I'm Amanda Loach's employee. I'm down from Office of Emergency Management.
Okay.
And so the tsunami signs. So first of all, do you have any specific questions for me that I can jump in?
I will ask Brianna if she can recall exactly what the questions were from, I think there were some questions that came from Chief Weston.
Okay.
But I think the intent here is we have a lot of visitors in town. And I think the area around Old Girdwood, so by Sorrow Mile, is one of the very few residential areas in Anchorage that I think under the tsunami assessment last year or year before actually has a risk of flooding and inundation. So other communities have clear evacuation signing, and I think that would be helpful for us.
Absolutely. So in 2024, we conducted a hazard identification and risk analysis. I think that's maybe what you're referring to. Before that, the state conducted their own report of investigation inundation study for tsunami. And there is a potential, although rare, to in Girdwood have a tsunami that resulted from a significant, and we're talking about 8, 9 plus in severity earthquake that could cause a tsunami at high tide in the Upper Cook Inlet. So there is evidence that there has been tsunamis in Anchorage and Upper Cook Inlet, but nothing that we can see recently. And so even in 1964, because it was at low tide, nobody really realized it. So we seem to be in a point where the tsunami is part of our comprehensive emergency operations plan, and we have to update it. So that's all to say that, yes, we know that Girdwood needs signs, and we have to work with a few different partners to get those signs. So National Weather Service, through state DOT, as a matter of fact, they work with the local jurisdiction on what they call a tsunami ready evacuation plan. And so we can have basically federally credentialed evacuation signage, but we have to go through a few planning steps to get there. So, and that's what we would recommend. We recommend the full study with the state. And so it's an application. Basically, what we would do is we do some evacuation planning here. And I know Chief Weston's already kind of on top of some of this, but we would have waypoints, and we'd have all these points in the evacuation planning that have to be pre-established and identified in the emergency operations plan for us to actually have it count legitimately with the state and then with federal partners as well. And that way it's not necessarily free to us, but we go through their program and these signs become ours. We would like to be done by October 1st. So I'm just kind of stepping into this role at this point as mitigation. So I've been here since July, and tsunami science is definitely part of the mitigation program, and that's my account. So I'm gathering the references and resources and POCs, and there's a few entities to work with, but I think the message here is, yes, we have scientific analysis now that says Girdwood particular and the Port of Alaska have tsunami hazards. And so now that we have that scientific backing, we can start developing our plan, evacuation plan, in order to get signage.
Okay, and sorry, you mentioned October the 1st, the date. Did you say that was the date at which you would be starting this process?
No, that we hope in 6 months' time that that is somewhat a dart on the wall. Right, okay. Because I don't have a good relationship with you all here in Girdwood yet, but I think I know the steps to get these signs now. It's just going to take a little bit of evacuation planning to get it done.
Okay, thank you. So it's in progress, and that's the sort.
Yep, and I'll leave everybody my card today and everything else. And
thank you.
Okay.
Good to meet you, Ben. Any other questions from the board? Okay, let's jump back to
If I might, Mike, I think I can answer 5 really quickly if you wanted to quickly. And the short answer there is we at this point are not doing intra-fund loans as a municipality because of some challenging situations that we've gotten ourselves into in the past. That said, I've raised the question with our public finance division and we'll pursue a question for them of whether in certain specified situations we may be willing to do it. I understand the challenge of generating capital investment for Girdwood in light of the bond not passing this year. And so I want to further explore with Ross whether there are a certain set of circumstances in which we would consider doing inter-fund loans as a municipality, but more to come on that.
Do you have an approximate timescale for?
I have not heard back from Ross on his timescale yet, but I would say I definitely before the next time we meet, I'll have an answer, and I would likely before then.
Okay.
And Ross did call me today and I gave him all the.
Oh, yeah.
information
Oh,
I'm
good.
looking for, so we'll keep moving along.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, and I think I know there has been some discussion about whether there are better ways of asking the question to voters.
Yeah, I would say that also just for the group's visibility, we have spent a bunch of time workshopping the language of the bond to try. I feel like people still are not quite understanding that those are not area-wide, and area-wide, we're not paying for the Girdwood bond from people who don't have property within the service area. And so we've tossed around various different versions of how we might revise that language further. So we will also work on that as we get closer to election season next year.
Yes, I mean, in the last questions, it was somewhat buried in the third paragraph, and even I don't read the third paragraph of bond questions.
Yes. I don't think anyone does.
Please.
Just want to add thank you, because I do know I've talked to very educated voters who didn't realize until they read a opinion piece in the chair there about that. And so I was really struck by how much people, even people who pay very close attention, might not be aware of that. So thank you for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no further questions on that, let's jump to number 3, short-term rental.
Okay, short-term rental. I read your framework. I had 2 questions. So, but the background from, again, as I noted, we have not had the compliance with 1220-031 that I think that the Assembly hoped we would have when it was passed. I know that where we're going to go from here is we're going to propose something that repeals that, replaces it with a registration paradigm. So I had some questions about your proposal and how it might align with some of the thinking that's happening at City Hall about registration. And the first question was insurance. That was not something. What's the driving interest in the insurance requirement? I think that's not something that was in our initial thinking of a draft for an area-wide ordinance, but what's the thinking with the insurance? What is the need in satisfying?
Just to put the context, to make this clear, this is a kind of proposal for a general framework, not a set of absolutely, that these must be included or cannot be removed. So this is kind of a starting point. Insurance is a pretty common item you see in many communities.
Are you seeing issues with uninsured rentals? I was just trying to play out, what is the issue we're trying to solve for?
I think it's one of the issues around safety and sort of professionalism that we've seen in other communities. I can't speak particularly for the reason it's in this particular proposal, but it's a very common requirement in lots of ordinances. I mean, I guess the counter question is there an argument against it?
I think the question is, are we enforcing it? And then how are we enforcing it? And then what requirement, what would be the reason to enforce it? Okay, so one of my questions. The second was enforcement, because this contemplates creating a new staff within the service area for enforcement. And my question was, is that a concern that an area-wide ordinance would not be enforced adequately by a team in City Hall that was charged with enforcement municipality-wide? Is it just if there were a municipality-wide registration requirement, would you still be interested in the framework that's in the draft that contemplates additional Girdwood Valley staff doing enforcement specifically here?
I can speak individually. I know we haven't made that decision. We haven't made that decision as a board, but I think we are contemplating whether to, again, if we're in a position where we're trying to develop housing, we're managing or associated management of housing and appropriate a regulation, that we may be prepared to put some money into the enforcement side if there are Girdwood specific requirements. So in the past, when this has been discussed, the question of enforcement always comes up. And the general argument has been that there's not a great interest to invest money in enforcement across the whole of the municipality because the issues are quite so pressing. Here they are pressing. We may even end up with additional requirements in Girdwood. And if so, then I think we may be prepared, we'd at least be prepared to discuss whether we put something into the enforcement pot. So I don't think that should be a reason to not follow the regulations to the extent they would need to be in a community with 20 to 25% of our housing involved in short-term rental. It may not be necessary for the rest of Anchorage where it's 1.5%, but here it's such a huge part of our housing and so has such a huge impact on our housing that we may want additional regulatory.
Okay. Well, again, I think that writ large, like this, I mean, is relatively well aligned with what we're thinking about in terms of replacement for the current regulation scheme. And so I would say from here, I know there's a working group working on an initial draft that we would share with you for feedback and see if we can potentially address these concerns as part of a broader replacement of the existing regulation paradigm.
I have a question, but I want to make sure everyone knows. So the regulations that were attempted just over a year ago, I think.
Yeah.
And some of the previous ones were basically were structured within Title 7's the business licensing.
Okay.
This proposal is all within Title 21. I'm just wondering how they would interact.
Why is this in Title 21?
I think because Title 21, Chapter 9 is a Girdwood specific thing. So if we one of the tensions is what's beneficial municipal wide and what's beneficial to Girdwood. And we have a pressing issue now. I've had a pressing issue for several years, and we have kind of been persuaded to await the action at municipal wide level. That has been a very frustrating experience, and we've ended up multiple years later with nothing in place. So this is a proposal. Basically, let's go it alone and do a good specific thing. But we're aware that there is motivation and work going on at the municipal wide.
Yeah.
So how can these interact? I guess is the question.
It's a good question. I mean, I think if there were both a municipality-wide requirement and a separate requirement that were specific to Girdwood, they would then both apply here.
Right.
And we'd have to do whatever it was to register in Anchorage and then also register within the Girdwood Valley service area if this is where your short-term rental were located. Then you would be subject to both types of enforcement is, I think, how the two would intersect if we were to have both regulatory frameworks in place.
But there is active work going on to propose something at the municipal.
There is active work going on right now to replace what our relatively failed paradigm in Title 12 and replace it with something that would be, again, more of a registration framework.
Can I just add one thing? I agree with Mike about the administrative side of that, but also it does tie in with the multi-pronged financial approach. And so this is about building a base where we're able to, we really have to be able to get some funds to solve our problem. And it makes the most sense to get it from that's to some extent creating the issue, but we have not been able, as I said, Girdwood has felt frustrated in being able to access what the common perception is of our share of the bed taxes.
Oh, got it. So that's so the part of the motivation is keeping the registration fees here.
Because the taxes, which are probably 1.5 to 1.8 billion a year from short-term rentals in Girdwood, are going into general fund. Every other community that pretty much step one when bed tax is introduced is to use, for most communities, to use the money coming from short-term rentals to feed back into mitigation of the impact of a large number of short-term rentals. That is not happening in Anchorage. And that's proving to be a difficult argument to make. So even if just the registration fees came back, that's something. It's still nothing like what it should be.
Would they cover the staff that you're envisioning? I guess anyone kind of gamed out like what?
I think there's
so much money.
It's one of which is third party, and I think we costed out something which would work for contracting out, but not necessarily. So there are a couple of different ways. But there is behind this, there's a set of policy suggestions that come from GBUS, which we passed just over a year ago. There were 4 general principles. One of those is that taxes raised by short-term rentals should be fed back into mitigating their impacts. And that's something that's, again, we're not seeing, and we're having trouble getting traction on it. This is simpler, but does raise at least costs. This covers costs.
Okay.
Does anybody want to add to that? Okay, so what would the next steps be to make it very actionable?
I guess I think that I would propose that we work on our end with the draft that we propose. I can take some of these thoughts back to consider whether there's some kind of, additional changes or tweaks we might make to what the administration would propose. And then I can circulate that for feedback. I guess my question to you is there further action or response you want from me on the, separate from that, on the proposal that's Girdwood specific?
One thing is we could try and push this forward as something independent through maybe our assembly members. Is that going to be problematic?
I mean, my initial inclination as someone who values efficiency is that we should have the conversation as a part of the bigger, because we are going to be revisiting the ordinance right now, but I understand that may sound frustrating to you if you've having been through multiple iterations of this seeking a solution. So I understand that position as well.
Can you give us a timescale for when that discussion could happen?
I can circle back to you with that information. I know that the group, I think the first meeting of the group is coming the next week or so to try and redraft.
We're both in the group.
Yeah, when is it? You can tell me, when is the meeting?
I don't know. We haven't been invited to a meeting.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought that Halsey had.
But we're very fast workers.
That's what lawyers have.
I mean, we don't have much else going on.
They don't go by the hours, they can work efficiently.
Was there anything else on this topic? If not, then let's go briefly to public comment. Persons offering public comment, state full name and address. Full name. Public comments limited to 3 minutes on items not on the agenda. Okay, I'm not seeing anything from public comments. In that case, we will move to adjourn. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.